Okay, we're almost done with chapter 14, but first let's go over the full Keynesian model. So what we've worked with so far are simplified versions of the Keynesian model. So we worked with GDP is just consumption plus investment, right? That's really simplified version. We can add government to it, right? We did that. But to get the full model, we need to add both the trade sector and we haven't dealt with taxes yet. So we have to add in taxes and exports and imports to get the full model. Now, the reason that we simplify it is because when you do the full model, it gets really complex. The algebra gets very difficult. And I don't really care so much about you knowing that, so that you get the big point. So as we go through this, don't worry so much about the main algebra. I'll make some key points at the end. Okay. So now we have taxes. So we're going to have to change the consumption function to consider that we have taxes. So now consumption is going to be a function of disposable income. That's the income that you have left over after taxes. So if we have here disposable income equals your income minus taxes, right? And taxes are a portion of income. So the total amount of taxes equals your tax rate times income. Okay. So now if we have our consumption function, we can just now replace our old income with disposable income, which if we replace with that disposable income, that means it's now this income minus taxes. In that minus taxes, what is that? Well, that's minus the tax rate times your income. That's the total amount of taxes as we set up here above. So that's our new consumption function that we're going to have to use. And I think you can see if we try to put this in the model and then solve it algebraically, it's going to get really complex, but whatever, let's go for it. Um, imports are a function of income. It's a function as you buy more stuff, you buy more imports, right? So generally in the United States, about 14 or 15% of everything we buy is imports, right? So imports are a portion of income. So we could say the total amount of imports equals whatever portion of the stuff you buy is imports times your income, your GDP. And exports, we don't determine really how much we're exporting. That depends on how much people in other country are buying our exports. That depends on how the economies in other countries are doing. So that's exogenous. It's outside of our model. We're just going to give you a number, just like we do for investment in government. It's just exports is some number, right? So exports minus imports equals whatever the amount of exports minus the amount of imports, which is your marginal propensity to import or import rate times the amount of income. Okay. So now we could plug this into the entire model. Again, you don't need to know this algebra. I'm going to highlight a few points at the end, right? So if we have our y equals c plus I plus g plus exports minus imports, right? We can sub our consumption function in for the c in there. We can substitute our import function in for the m here. So those consumption function that I gave you before, it's right here. So we just sub that into this equation and that import function, right, that I gave you the previous slide, it's right there. So we just sub those in. Now remember what we got to do is we got all these y terms on the other side and we got y over here. So we got to get y all onto the left side, right? So the first thing we got to do is we got this C1 times this whole parentheses here. So let's distribute that through, right? So we get C1 times 1 minus C1 times the tax rate times income. Okay, so we distribute that through. And now we need to collect all the y terms onto the left side. Right. So you're taking from the right side to the left side. So if this one's being added here, we'll subtract it to get it to the left side. This one's being subtracted. So we'll add it to the left side. And so that you end up with this term, right? Big, long, complicated. Again, don't worry about the algebra. Factor out the y. So all the y terms are over here and we pull the y out. So this is y times all these things. So now we have this nice term here that we can divide to get y all by itself. And we end up with the thing. Again, don't worry about the algebra. Let's just talk about what this means here, right? Okay, so the points here. This is what we solved for, how we'd solve for y in the previous slide. This is still the simple thing that we saw before in the sense that it is just y equals a multiplier. This is our multiplier times the amount of autonomous expenditures. These are the autonomous expenditures, right? Autonomous expenditures are all the things that don't depend on y, they're just given, right? So still the multiplier times the amount of autonomous expenditures, but now the multiplier is this function here. And our autonomous expenditures also has now exports in it, and so it's a bit more complex also, right? So everything that depends on the amount of income, right, that changes as the amount of income changes, that is all now in the multiplier, right? So we have our taxes affects, how much we spend with uh, the amount of income. It changes how the total amount of taxes changes with the amount of income. So that is now in the multiplier, and the amount of imports change with the amount of income. So that is now in the multiplier, right? Everything that depends on the amount of income is in that multiplier. So what happens if we change one of these numbers, right? If we increase the tax rate, so here we have the tax rate going up, right? So tax rate going up, that's in this multiplier here, it's in the denominator of the multiplier. So that's going to make this denominator go up, right? And that denominator going up, if you have the denominator and a fraction going up, that means the fraction is going down. So if we increase the tax rate, the multiplier goes down. This should make intuitive sense. If people have to pay more taxes, they're going to buy less stuff, right? So if we give a person, $1,000 and they have no taxes, they're going to go out and spend a high portion of those $1,000, and that's going to give income to other people. If the person gets $1,000, but they have to pay, say, half of that in taxes, right? Now they only have $500 left to spend and raise other people's income. So if we increase people's taxes, people buy less, and that's going to decrease the multiplier. But this effect is fairly small, right? It's the tax rate times the marginal propensity to consume. So it's not an incredibly substantial effect, but it does cause that increase in taxes decreases the multiplier. If we're to increase the portion of imports, same thing as before. We're increasing this term, right? It's got a plus sign in front of it. So it's as this goes up, the denominator as a whole is going up. And as the denominator goes up, that means your multiplier is going down, right? So the more people buy of imports, the higher the portion of our sales that are imports. Purchases don't stimulate the local economy as much when a large portion of them are imports. Okay, so that was a very quick summary of the full model. So we've created another model where you can play with a app on the web. And so we're going to talk about that on the next video.